The Australian government says it wants to negotiate an important trade deal with the UK as efficiently and promptly as possible when Brexit is complete. How prompt is prompt?
Well, there are legal issues, obviously. The UK, for as long as it remains in the EU, can't negotiate individual trade deals, but once it leaves, it can. So at this stage, we say that we'll negotiate a free trade agreement with the UK when the time is right. That's the formula we use, by which we mean we can do some preliminary examination.
You can talk now about the parameters of it.
We're certainly talking already. We've set up a joint working group with the British government, and we're just having a look at the issue, scoping the issue, and trying to understand what questions will arise in any negotiation. But of course, we can't have formally any negotiation
until the country is out.
Until you leave, yeah.
Why is there no free trade deal between Australia and the European Union?
Well, there's a long and tortuous story, the story of Australia's trade relations with the European Union. Oh, basically, Australian agriculture is either banned or hugely restricted in terms of its access to the European Union. So we see the European Union, by the way, Australians see it as a pretty protectionist sort of organisation. Now, we are doing a scoping study on a free trade agreement with the European Union. We hope that during the course of next year we can enter into negotiations with them, but we have no illusions this would be a very difficult negotiation, but one we're giving substantial priority to.
Is there not a danger that when Britain leaves the EU, that the EU will become more protectionist, because this country has always been the most powerful voice for free trade?
Well, I hope that won't happen, but what I'd say is this: the reason why we wanted Britain to remain in the European Union is because it brought to the one of the reasons it brought to the table the whole free trade mentality, which has been a historic part of Britain's approach to international relations. So without the UK in the European Union, you'll lose that. I mean, it's a very loud voice, of course, in the European Union, so you will lose that voice. That's going to be a disadvantage.
The figure that jumped out at me in the film was that it took you only 15 months to negotiate a free trade deal with the United States.
Yes, well, the thing is, it's about political will. A free trade agreement is going to be no problem unless you want, unless you want to protect particular sectors of your economy. Now, in that particular case, there was one sector the Americans insisted on protecting, and that was their sugar industry. In the end, after 15 months of negotiation, two relatively free trading countries, we had fixed up everything, but we had to answer the question, would we go ahead with this free trade agreement without sugar, and we decided that we would do that. But other than that, it was relatively easy to negotiate because we're both free trade countries. So with the UK, I don't think, you can't be sure, but I don't think a free trade agreement would take very long to negotiate with the UK, because the UK wouldn't want to put a lot of obstacles in the way to Australia, and we were certainly, you know, not to give away our hand, but we wouldn't want to put a lot of obstacles in the way to, of British exports. The
trend in recent years on trade has been to do big regional trade deals, but President-elect Trump has now pretty made clear that the Pacific trade arrangement deal is dead. It looks like the transatlantic trade deal is almost dead as well. The American election put a nail in the coffin. The French elections could put another nail in the coffin. It could be over. Are we returning to a world of bilateral trade deals? It's country with country rather than regional blocs?
Not necessarily. I think in the Asia-Pacific's case, we will continue to look at plurilateral or multilateral trade arrangements, and even if the Trans-Pacific Partnership isn't ratified by the Americans, we nevertheless have other options there. However, our approach has always been this. The ultimate would be free trade throughout the world, through the WTO. That's proving pretty hard to achieve, of course. Secondly, if we can get a lot of countries engaged in a free trade negotiation, that's also pretty good if it's possible, but it's always more difficult. But we do bilateral free trade agreements as well. We have one with China, with Japan, with the United States, Singapore, Thailand, so the list goes on. And they have been hugely beneficial to Australia, those bilateral free trade agreements, so it can work.
Let me ask you this, because Australia, you've been dealing with the EU to do a free trade deal. What lessons are there? How quickly do you think could Britain do a free trade deal with the EU if we leave the single market?
Well, there's a completely different concept involved in the case of Britain and the EU, and that is, at the moment, there are no restrictions on trade. So you and the EU would be talking about whether you're going to erect barriers to trade. Now, we're outsiders. We don't get too much involved in this debate except to say this. We don't want to see the global trade system disrupted by the erection of tariff barriers between the United Kingdom, the fifth biggest economy in the world, and the European Union. So our expectation is that not just the British, but the Europeans will try to make the transition to Brexit as smooth as possible in every possible way, but particularly commercially.
Let me slip in one more, just a yes or no if you can. If Britain and Australia do a free trade agreement, would it be possible that that would include free movements of the Australian and the British people?
Well, I think we'd probably stick with our present non-discriminatory immigration system. Australia does not discriminate against any country. Of course, the European Union's free movement means that you discriminate against non-European citizens. Probably not.
All right. High Commissioner, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.